This video is sponsored by Movie Palette. Hello and welcome to Projector at the London Film Festival, and on this episode, Jessica Chastain believes that Eddie Redmayne is killing his patients in the Netflix true crime drama The Good Nurse. In the early noughts, Amy Loughren, played by Jessica Chastain, is an overworked but compassionate nurse trying to provide for her kids whilst also hiding a serious heart condition. When the hospital hires a new nurse, Charles Cullen, played by Eddie Redmayne, Amy quickly befriends him on their shifts, but soon patients begin to die mysteriously at an alarming rate. Amy soon begins to fear that Cullen is murdering his patients, and with the hospital trying to cover up the incidents, Amy puts everything on the line to get the evidence to try and stop Cullen taking more lives. So this is the first of my reviews for the London Film Festival this year, which I actually attended in person for the very first time. I was accredited press once again, and I saw a number of movies at in-person press shows, including this one. I'll talk more about my general experience at the festival, as well as more reviews of movies from the festival in forthcoming videos, so be sure to subscribe and keep a lookout for them. The Good Nurse is based on Charles Graeber's 2013 true crime book of the same name, which featured interviews with both Charles Cullen and Amy Loughren, the nurse-turned-informant that helped bring Cullen to justice. Loughren has also been very much involved with the film version and has also helped promote it. The film is directed by Tobias Lindholm, previously of A War and a Hijacking, but he's also best known as being a regular co-collaborator with Thomas Vinterberg, co-writing several of his screenplays, including most recently Another Round. The Good Nurse marks his English-language debut. The script is adapted by Christy Wilson Kearns, best known for 1917 and Last Night in Soho, and Eddie Redmayne and Jessica Chastain have long been attached to this project, even before Netflix themselves bought it several years ago. And so with this very strong creative team, what they've done with this story is turn it into a very chilling and quite compelling drama. The Good Nurse features Eddie Redmayne's best performance in years. Redmayne often specialises in characters that are quiet, mild-mannered and unassuming, and The Good Nurse takes those qualities and turns them on their head and weaponises them to the point where they become insidious. At first glance, Charles Cullen is a good nurse. He has a decent bedside manner, he very quickly befriends Amy and fits in right alongside everyone else. He is a hard-working, competent individual, seemingly. He looks like everyone could just overlook him, and that's exactly the point. He is the kind of person that just offers to help out all the time. He's very generous in some regards. He is the archetypal nice guy. It's only when you start to look closer do things start to look a little bit sinister. In his conversations with Amy as they're sharing food together, he often mentions his ex-wife and how she's concocting all these stories about me and this stuff about the dog going on. And that is the sort of very minor red flag that if you're a friend with someone like that, and you don't know their true character, you can sort of overlook, and it's only later when you truly realise who those people are, do you suddenly realise that those were indicators of exactly what they were capable of. And so there are very few moments in The Good Nurse where his mask actually slips and reveals the true darkness underneath that, which actually makes it even more chilling, because in many ways Cullen is the embodiment of the banality of evil. He is an everyday person who inexplicably kills people. The first time we see Cullen is in the very first shot of the film, which is an extended tracking shot that gradually zooms in as the opening credits play. In it, Cullen is working at another hospital in the mid-90s when a patient flatlines in front of him, and as all the other medical personnel rush into the room, the camera continues unbroken, and as they try and fail to save this person's life. It moves past all the other action going on to focus on Cullen standing in the corner watching, and on Redmayne's face, which is terrifying. And in that moment, we as audience members are voyeuristic. We are watching him as he is watching someone die. And his expression, there's something fundamentally unreadable about it. There's just a void, an emptiness, as he looks on, almost bird-like, fixated on what he's done. And I think this is something that Redmayne has integrated into his performance, because we don't know why Cullen did this. We don't know his motivations, because he's never revealed it at any point. The movie does offer a couple of tiny explanations very late into the movie, only in passing, but what's truly frightening about Cullen is that he killed randomly and indiscriminately. He wasn't a mercy killer or anything like that. He just killed for the sake of killing. Given that this is the way the film opens, even when he arrives at the new hospital, we don't trust him because we know what he's capable of. And over the course of the film, as it reveals more and more about how he's done what he's done, even though his actions on screen aren't explicitly menacing towards Amy, everything that he's done, everything that we know that he's capable of doing, makes him an increasingly queasy presence to watch on screen. And Redmayne's performance is very well controlled, very tight, up until the final scenes where he starts to have these meltdowns. And Redmayne's performance gets especially interesting towards the end of the movie, where he starts to get more of the focus again, because you get the sense that even Cullen himself doesn't quite understand why he's doing what he's doing, but is getting increasingly agitated and paranoid in his behaviour, not out of any sense of guilt, but because he knows that the net is closing in around him and he doesn't want to get caught. But Redmayne is matched by a very strong performance by the ever-reliable Jessica Chastain, and make absolutely no mistake, this is Amy Loughran's story, not Charles Cullen's. The film primarily plays out from Amy's perspective, which is a very deliberate and conscious choice, not least of which because she is the good nurse of the title. She is extremely hard-working, she has these very long shifts at the ICU, but she's also very compassionate and understanding to all of her patients, and always trying to provide for other people, even when it puts herself on the line. Early on, she gets chewed out for allowing a visitor to stay longer than visiting hours will allow, and she's doing all of these shifts because she needs to provide for her family, and she's kind of struggling on that front. At home, her daughters are missing her because of the long hours that she spends away from home, and also because she's struggling to provide for all of them. There is this sense that she is really struggling to keep her head above water almost constantly, but even so, she is always trying to do things for other people. And Amy knows that she has a duty of care to her patients. She builds relationships with them so that when they start mysteriously dying, she not only knows that something is wrong, but she feels compelled to find out why and to try and resolve it. And the more she goes after it, the more she has to do it on her own back, because the system, the hospital, is not going to help her. She is putting herself under an enormous amount of risk. Her job, her family, all of that is in jeopardy, especially because it's already at risk at the beginning of the movie, because Amy has a heart condition that she is keeping secret. Her heart is failing her. She's working these very long hours with very strenuous activities like turning patients and turning beds, but she can't tell her employer because they will fire her on the spot. So she has to just play the waiting game of trying to stay employed at the hospital for a year to actually get the medical insurance to have the life-saving operation that she desperately needs. And that's another example of how the system is failing her and failing the other patients. And this is actually how she and Cullen bond, because Cullen starts to notice that on their shifts together that she is struggling to keep up, and she reveals the secret to him because he will help her try and conceal it long enough to actually pass the year mark. And when she reveals her secret, he unwittingly reveals his, because he helps her by using the exact same flaw in the system that he has been exploiting to get away with murder. But Amy doesn't realise that at the time, and later, when she puts the pieces together, it makes her especially driven to try and stop her one-time friend, and to try and stop him from killing anybody else. But the problem then becomes trying to prove it. Like the book it's based on, the film is highly critical of the for-profit American healthcare system, where hospitals are businesses, and therefore their first instinct is to protect the business, not their patients. The film basically says these hospitals were likely aware of very much what was happening, and probably who was causing it, but they couldn't claim liability or responsibility for it, because then that would open them up to being sued. So that means the system tries to protect itself. They may claim that they're participating in an investigation, but all through the course of it, they are obstructing it through various different means. Noah Emmerich and Nnamdi Asomugha play the investigators going through the case, and all throughout, there are different methods that are just trying to prohibit them from gaining access, whether it be patient records that only have the last few pages deliberately printed out, or having a hospital representative in the room while they're interviewing the staff, making sure they don't say anything that puts the hospital at risk. It is purposely and intentionally frustrating, and the detectives get increasingly agitated at the stonewalling that they absolutely know is happening right in front of them, but they can't do anything about. In fact, there's even a scene where Asomugha's character actually snaps at the hospital's representative, which is a scene that doesn't feel like it probably happened in real life, because if it actually did happen that way, he would likely end up getting the sack. But even so, that is meant to be an embodiment of the audience's anger at just this constant blocking of information all throughout this process, and trying to stop the investigation coming up with any actual answers. And so, in that way, the system is not only protecting itself, it is protecting a killer in its ranks at the same time, because instead of trying to tackle the problem and trying to stop this person, essentially what the hospitals kept on doing for years is just passing the buck, is just simply sending it somewhere else. Instead of actually bringing this person to justice, they actually became complicit in the crime by allowing him to continue practicing. And that is perhaps the most rage-inducing element of it all. And it's only when Amy starts to cooperate with their investigation on her own, undercover, as an informant, do they finally start to get anywhere. It's purely down to her good conscience that things actually came to an end, because otherwise he would just keep on killing, and the system would keep on protecting him. And very slowly at first, but surely, the film starts to draw you in. Lindholm directs the movie with a very calm, almost clinical manner. A lot of the cinematography is quite murky, soft contrast. It feels like there's a very deliberate, conscious effort to try and not sensationalise the subject, which is exactly how it should be. Netflix has a real problem with their true crime drama, and especially their documentaries, which run very tabloidy for sensationalising subjects, but that's not the case here. Actually, the film presents itself fairly soberly, which actually makes it more shocking, in my opinion. I do think the tone of the movie does feel a little bit uneasy at point, because a lot of it is an investigative drama. It's essentially a case of trying to find the evidence to prove what's already going on, but also it does feel like there's a bit of a Hitchcockian suspense thriller going on at times, especially as the movie progresses. And I feel like Wilson Kearns' script actually tries to push the film in that direction at points. And it's understandable why you'd want to try and mine suspense out of this story, and especially the relationship between Amy and Cullen, especially once she knows exactly who she's dealing with. And sometimes that can be really effective, just where mundane things like a sticky door handle suddenly become threatening, or just him coming round to look over the kids. It's those kind of things that put the hairs on the back of your neck. But then there are some times where occasionally there feels like an instance that feels a little bit too dramatized. Like there's a moment where Amy, once she starts to put the pieces together, she rushes into hospital and runs up its staircase from the car park, and you just go, that probably didn't happen that way, because no one that knowingly has a very serious heart condition decides that they're going to run up the stairs when they could take the lift. It's one of those things that just feels a little bit fake and stagey and kind of distracted me periodically from the movie. And occasionally The Good Nurse is a little bit guilty of that kind of thing, when really it didn't need to indulge in those tactics, especially because those stand out more because of the approach the film largely has elsewhere. The Good Nurse is a movie that genuinely haunted me for days. It's a disturbing true story, albeit one largely handled here through implication. But if you have any compassion whatsoever, your mind must surely be with the victims and their families, those lives that were ruined by Cullen's actions. Cullen has admitted to killing 29 people over the course of his medical career. It's estimated he might have killed perhaps hundreds more. He may well be America's most prolific serial killer, and I find the loss there almost incalculable to comprehend. And it's a movie that has damning things to say about the American healthcare system. This is an indictment. The film is anchored by two very strong performances by Jessica Chastain and especially Eddie Redmayne, who is truly scary in this movie. But it's a film that also reminds us that when we're sick and vulnerable, how much we put ourselves in other people's hands for good and for worse. You've probably seen this swish thing in the background of the entire video. This is a movie palette. It takes the colour tone of an entire movie and turns it into this artwork. So each of these lines represents a scene or sequences from the entire movie. In this case, this is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And if you would like a movie palette of your own, then you can go to moviepalette.com and use the code FILMBRAIN15 to get 15% off your order. And thanks again to Movie Palette for sponsoring this video. If you like this review and you want to support my work, you can give me a tip at my Ko-fi page, or with YouTube's Super Thanks feature, which is right below the video. Or you can buy some of my merch from my TeePublic page. Or you can support me via my Patreon, where you can see my videos early among other perks, including access to my Discord server. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.